evening, TDN listeners and viewers, and welcome to this week in interview with your host and guide, Anthony Drago. It is the highlight of my week. You know that already, to spend an hour with you on a Wednesday evening. And I thank you for making the time and making this week in interview a part of your weekly schedule. All these things that take your attention, you choose to make this weekend interview part of your schedule, and for that I am truly honored. So welcome, welcome, welcome to my regular listeners who come back every Wednesday. I appreciate it, and I really never take your time for granted. I always make sure that I put some effort and attention into what we do when we spend this hour together. And so tonight I am super, super excited with what we have on the agenda. If tonight is the first time that you're listening to this weekend interview, welcome. I am not ashamed to say that my objective is to make you a regular watcher or listener to this weekend interview, because I believe that what we have to share on this weekend interview is valuable and it's informative. I like to think that I have some of the most informed audience anywhere on media, social or otherwise. Very good evening to you in Dominica. If you're listening to us on RVR Jams Radio on DG Play Channel 59 and SBE Radio in Toronto, they carry this weekend interview live as well in Toronto, Canada. You can view us on tdntv.net. You can listen to us if you're driving or otherwise cannot be distracted. Visually, you can listen to us on tdnradio.net. And of course, we are on the social media on Facebook, on This Week in Interview Facebook page, as well as TDN Radio Caribbean Facebook page. We are on YouTube and Instagram and all those pages. Now, let me tell you, today, the 22nd of March, is World Water Day. And that is what we are talking about today. We are celebrating water, and we are also appealing on behalf of water, fresh water. So tonight, I want to have a fresh conversation about water. We need to reset our perspective, our paradigm, and our way of thinking about water, especially if you're from Dominica. You know, we just take water for granted because it's always falling from the sky. When folks want to tell you that things are not free, they tell you money doesn't fall from the sky, or money doesn't fall from trees. But if you're from Dominica, water falls from the sky regularly, and it stays on the trees, and then the wind comes and water falls from the trees. And so we need to think about that resource and reset our thinking, so that we can continue to enjoy all the benefits of water. So in 1993, the United Nations declared the 22nd of March as International Water Day. And that is what we are celebrating today, because today is the 22nd of March. And so we're going to take a quick intro music, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to introduce you to my guest. I'm very excited to have with me on this program tonight Dr. Allan Williams. And once we start the conversation, you'll understand what my excitement about. He's a consummate professional, and just so just a treasure trove of really accurate and detailed and interesting information about natural resources, especially land and water. So I'm super excited for that. Let's just take a quick break. We get some music, and we come back. I will introduce you to my guest, Dr. Allan Williams. Stay tuned.
Hey! Water, water, water. Water is life. Who control the water decides who lives and who dies. You can cut my phone, you can cut my light, but when you touch my water, you threaten my life. should be without water. In this
It of the music because we don't want to eat too much into our time with Dr. Allan Williams tonight. But we want to say thank you. That song is by none other than King Dice. I think he's won the crown in Dominica now, I think 7 or 8 times. And he made this tune about water, 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 water is life. If you mess with my water, you mess with my life. Those are very, very true words. So as I was saying before we took this little interlude, is that March 22nd is International Water Day. It is declared by the UN. And of course, it is the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 6 states the aim is to ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all by the year 2030. Ambitious, 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 ambitious goal. Maybe it didn't seem ambitious at the time that they set it in 2015, but we are in 2023, 7 years away from, and to ensure availability of water and sanitation for all. We are very, very far from achieving that goal. I am in communication with some folks from Mozambique, and they sent me some photos of where folks are collecting water for drinking in Mozambique. And wow, it's heartbreaking, it's heart-wrenching to see the conditions that people have to exist in to get water, and they have to walk so far to get to even that poor quality of water. So definitely, it's if we have to achieve that goal, then some miracles have to happen. It reminds me of when the food and the FAO had a goal. When I was in high school, I remember they had a goal of food for all by the year 2000. And I was in high school I graduated in 83. I made it myself. And they had a goal of food for all by the year 2000. Well, 2000 has come and gone, and we see that folks are still going hungry. So, my guest tonight, folks, on this weekend interview, that is Dr. Allan N. Williams. He was born in French Guiana, um, where he did primary school. And then he migrated to the US and went to Miami University, not in Florida, but in Ohio, where he did his bachelor's degree. His master's degree is from Cornell, and his PhD was also from Cornell. He is a trained economist, and he specializes in enterprise theory. He specialized in enterprise theory and management of natural resources, particularly land and water. He is a consultant of consultants of governments and of many institutions, and he's contributed quite a bit to the development of the Caribbean from, what we inherited from our colonial past is a lot of sometimes ad hoc and hodgepodge sort of arrangements in terms of land management and land ownership. We have to, thank people like Dr. Williams for helping us to put models together that that help us to how you can say it, organize it in such a way that they can think about them and we can manage them. He's going to tell us more about what that involves. It sounds complicated, but when you're dealing with issues like that, the gift that people like Dr. Williams have is to be able to simplify them. But tonight we're talking about water. And I will tell you that Dr. Williams, Allan Williams, has written a book on that subject, specifically called Deluge. And that book really talks about the surplus of water that the island of Dominica has and juxtaposes it against the scarcity of water in some of the other islands very close to Dominica. So we know some of the Leeward Islands, some of the Windward Islands are pretty parched. And so he has studied the topic, he has studied the subject matter, and he is the ideal person to have on tonight as my guest to talk about water and exactly what we need to do to make it more available to those who are wanting it. So I'm not going to take any more of your time. I want to introduce you. I want you to join me in giving a very warm welcome to Dr. Allan Williams. Allan, welcome to this weekend interview. It's such an honor and a delight to have you on as my guest.
Thank you very much, Anthony. And thanks also to your listeners who have decided to tune in tonight. I'm very happy about that.
Yes, we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to talk about a subject that is literally life. We think about the air that we breathe, and we say we know for sure we cannot do without air because we will expire very quickly if we were deprived of air. But water is similar, except it takes a little bit longer. Because our body is composed of water, it gives us the opportunity to, mostly water, it gives us the opportunity to deplete that before we actually die from it. But without water, we would die. One of the quotes I saw when I was preparing for this program is that many people live without love, but nobody has been able to live without water. So I gave a brief introduction of you, Allan. I want to give you the opportunity to just set the stage, set the background on your interest and your work in the area of water, so that will set the stage for our conversation tonight.
Well, thank you again. The only thing I would correct in your interview, I thank you very much for the kind remarks, is that I was born in British Guiana, not French Guiana.
I said French?
Really, yes, but it
I'm
doesn't really
sorry, I
matter
have British
which.
written there, and I don't know why I read French.
Well, it doesn't really matter
Thanks
which
for the
colonial
correction.
power. They would have produced the same thing.
Right.
In a short synopsis, my years, I have been for the last 50 years a consultant to governments and international financial institutions and NGOs in the Caribbean on matters concerning something that we call land administration. And as you would know, you cannot effectively administer the land resources in any country without touching on the water availability resources in that country. Now, in addition to my consultancy, I've spent about 15 years supporting colleagues in Dominica in designing and seeking financial support for a project to ship fresh water from Dominica to the water-stressed islands in the Eastern Caribbean. So I accumulated to myself quite a lot of information, data and information about these situations. In the first lockdown, however, in Trinidad, which incidentally began in March of 2020, we couldn't travel, and I spent the 4 months putting together the various reports that I had in my own possession into a book, which is the one that you mentioned, dealing with these three things: the Dominica water surplus, the Caribbean water crisis, and the global water challenge. And that has been my preoccupation for the last 15 years.
Right. And so I think right off the bat, listeners can see why Allan is the most qualified person to be on here talking to us about water. Because as you said, water is so closely intertwined with land administration, land management, the use of, and especially in Dominica, almost every piece of land you have has a river or ravine or some kind of waterway And even if it appears that it doesn't, just wait until the next rain, and you're definitely going to have some water flowing on your land. But Alan, you mentioned about Dominica. Let's bring it to the Eastern Caribbean, for example. Caribbean, Dominica have a surplus of water. And then you go just next door and you have folks in Antigua and Anguilla and these places that don't seem to have sufficient water to meet their needs. Are we can we expand that first of all if we want to take a large view on that? And is that what really happens on a planet, on the earth, on a global scale, that there is more demand for water than there is actual supply of water? And of course, we're talking about fresh water.
Yes, yeah, that is a very interesting question. Of course, I give away my position by writing a book called Deluge, which
Right.
suggests that I don't really think that there is any scarcity of water on the planet. But let's just deal with this. The fact is that water is everywhere, okay? 71% of the Earth's surface, as we know, is covered with water. And 97% of the Earth's water is salt water, okay, which leaves us about 3% of all the water in the earth being fresh water. And here's the interesting thing. Of that 3%, 60% of it is held in glaciers, 30% is held on the ground in reservoirs, and only 10% is easily accessible for immediate concern. Okay. So it may start to look as if, well, we don't have that much water on the planet to start with. So are we faced with an inevitability? Well, that's not, well, let's not get too fast in coming to those conclusions, because let me just give you another synopsis here. Let us say that we had an alien visitor who came around, and in his spaceship he's flying around and he's sending back reports. The first thing he probably will say is that in this planet, the most prevalent thing that I'm seeing is water. Because as I said, 70% of the surface is covered by water. And then they will ask him, what about the intelligence life on the planet? Now he may say something to the effect, well, I can't swear about the intelligence part of it, but in terms of the life part of it, what I'm seeing is that over 60%, first of all, these human beings exist on the Earth, on the terrestrial part of the planet. And over 60% of the terrestrial part of the planet shows no influence of human interaction. So they're not on 60% of the planet. Okay. And another 30% of the terrestrial surface is wilderness, grasslands, deserts, etc. So on 10% of the Earth's landmass, that is actually occupied by humans. So listen to this. Then that sounds like, if you now look at how humans cluster, humans will be clustering in less than 1% of the Earth's surface.
I've never thought of it in that way.
So yes, so this alien will report and say, in reality, it is humans that are more scarce in the Earth than water, and he wouldn't be wrong in saying that. Okay, but let me just quickly sort of not appear to be skipping over the question of scarcity, as we call it. Okay, and tell you that you are sure that there is scarce resources of water in one place and abundant in another. And the reason for the scarcity of water in different parts of the world has more to do with how water behaves when it's among us. And I'm sorry to tell you, but in my judgment, when fresh water is among us, it behaves like a fugitive. I repeat, it behaves like a fugitive. And why am I saying that? Well, if you just stop and think, the rain pours down the water, We look up to the skies and we thank the Heavenly Father for sending us this blessing. We even open our mouth and take a few inside there. And
Mm-hmm.
then we look down. And as soon as we look down, what do we see? The water starts to disappear under the surface of the earth. And then we turn around. And what do we see? The water starts to run and into little streams, into rivers, and is quickly trying to join its brethren and them in the ocean,
The
in
ocean.
salt water where
Salt
we have
water.
where we can't drink. Okay. So you tell me now, if we throw up our hands and we say, "Oh my gosh, the rains came and I didn't collect enough of that water," we'll hear a voice that says, "Don't be too concerned. It's gonna come again."
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes again, it will do the same bag of tricks. So literally, the water is saying, "I will keep coming, and it's up to you to catch me if you can." Now, Anthony, if you write a novel like that, I'm quite sure they classify your main character as being a fugitive. And that's why I say water behaves like a fugitive. Okay. But just one last point into this, in spite of the fact I'm using that side of thing to suggest that this thing is so dynamic. Okay. There is there is one thing that we must understand how we now behave. Okay. In reality, we humans are continuously being given a chance to reconfigure our social systems in line with the amount of fresh water that we can capture and we can make available to us. Okay. Now, I want to just end by saying those two things, capture and make available, are not the same thing. Okay. And that is because where we choose to settle, human beings have a preference to either bring whatever extra water there is for our needs to us, or to remove whatever water we deem too much away from us. Okay. So that the water that we should think is available is not limited by what we can capture within our own little political state. So that is my feeling about water per se.
Right. And in history, the projects, the great aquifers and the aqueducts that were built to transport water from the Nile, for agriculture and to bring into the Roman cities and so on. They've been, it gives testament to what you said, that what we humans are focused on doing is getting water from where it is captured and bringing it to where we choose to settle. And I really like the concept of the fugitive, um, because when I started off, I compared water and air as two of the most essential, the two most essential things we need for life. When you think about it, although air doesn't run away like water, it's invisible. And so in that sense, we don't understand, or we don't appreciate exactly what the impact our actions are having on that resource. The other thing I want to unpack a little bit from what you said, Alan, is I like so much the way you broke down the concept of why, even though it would appear that the majority of water that we have is less than available for us, is about 1%, or a little more than 1%. You then turn around and say, but human beings don't occupy more than 1% on the surface of the earth. And so they sort of balance off each other. If anything, there seems that it should
Right,
be mathematically, there should be
right,
surplus water for our needs.
right.
So why do you think that water is not, I'm going to use the word valued, and I want you to talk about that a little bit. That water is not valued the way it should be for how important it is. So, for example, take oil, for example. and you buy a gallon of petrol to put in your car, which comes from oil. And right now it's, I don't know, in the Caribbean, I think in Dominica it's like $14 a gallon. But in water, we sell it so cheaply that it is valued in thousands of gallons, maybe $10 for 1,000 gallons and so on. Why is it that water, as important as it is, that you think that we seem to value it less?
Well, that is partly semantics. And I say
Mhm.
partly semantics because in economics, when we say value, in many times we are looking at it in terms of the price. Okay, because you
Right.
mentioned the relative price.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
But when you say price, then you are speaking of exchange value, what we can exchange for it.
Right.
And so you can see that some commodities in the market have very high value because there isn't too much substitutes for them. So diamonds are very valuable. Okay. But if you go to the jewelry and you want to buy a nice diamond necklace for your girlfriend and you hear the price, you're likely to tell the guy, well, is there anything that is substitutable? And he
Hmm.
said, well, you have zirconia, which
Hmm.
looks like diamonds, and that's a cheaper one. You buy that.
And most of people like me cannot tell the difference anyway.
And that's most people will be able to tell the difference. Well, when you take water, the first thing, let's talk about the economic value, and I'm going to just run through the different values. Water is the only commodity traded in any market that has no substitutes at any price. You must stop and think about it. Absolutely no substitutes at any price. So if the price is $1,000,000, you have to buy it. And if you can't buy it, you just die. As simple
Right.
as that. Okay.
Hmm.
So in economic sense, this is actually the superb value indicator, something that has no substitute at any price. Then we have the social value of water. Okay, that has many components, but the first one, of course, is that it is it is essential for our well-being in a very interesting sense. Now, you mentioned air. The diseases that can threaten our existence can be spread in two ways with two mediums. One is air. So we just went through COVID-19, which will spread more by air. So that's why when you go for test, they check your nostrils to see if you've been inhaling any of the COVID virus. Okay. The other one is water. Okay. If we don't have sanitary water systems, we have certain disease that can spread. They're called waterborne disease. Okay. Cholera is the biggest one that can wipe us out. Okay. So this now tells you that its value has to do with helping to maintain our social cohesion. And furthermore, and you also mentioned this together, if we looked at all the major civilizations that arose over the history, you see that you're quite right. All of them arose in very close proximity to water. Okay, on some river or the other. So I wouldn't really get into them. But let me just throw two other things, by the way, Anthony. Water has very strong or high political value. Okay. And it's as simple as this. If you control the water resource of somebody, you have power. If you do not control the water resource of somebody, you are vulnerable. Okay. So I liked what King Dice said because the guy quite knows what he's talking about. He's not speaking and saying about who owns the water. He's saying if you control the water, not if you own it. You can own whatever you want to own. If you control the water, if you control my water, you have power over me. Okay, and that tells us another aspect of water. And that is fundamentally a shared resource. We all need to share in it. And when you speak of shared resources, the interests in shared resources are stakeholders, not shareholders. And that's the difference between control and ownership. Okay. Let me just give you one quick axiom in terms of political value of water. And that is, in our political democracy, if the issue of an adequate freshwater supply comes up on the political agenda, you can make a relatively clear prediction of who's going to win and who's going to lose that election. You don't have to do too much in terms of polling. You just have to ask one question. Do you think the guys running the show right now can significantly improve your access to reliable fresh water? And here you go. Just take how many people say yes and how many people say no, add them up, and you have a good idea of exactly who is likely to win if the election is fair. Okay, that's the first.
So except if you're from Dominica.
I said if the election,
No, I
if
wasn't talking about
everybody
the
gets
free.
to vote
I
and the
wasn't talking about
election
the.
is fair.
I
Let's
wasn't
put
talking
it
about
that
the
way.
free and fair one. It's because water is so available in Dominica that is not one of those things that people take. They take it for granted so much that that's not one of the things that
Oh yeah. Oh
that
yeah.
comes up right now. That's
Yes,
what I meant.
yeah, but it still has political value, and we'll talk about that a little later on. Just
Yeah.
one last thing also, and
Uh-huh.
that is the environmental value of water. You talked about 70% of our body is water, etc. And your shirt is saying it. Water is life.
Water is life.
Yeah,
And
I mean, we have to understand that, Anthony, because
Mhm.
when we go out, scientists, to any other planet, when we seek to find out whether there is any possibility of life as we know it on that planet, we look to see if there's any remnants of water.
Of water. That is true.
That is the first thing we do. If there's none, guys, don't waste your money.
Right. We don't look for carbon. We don't look for
That
any
is
one of
right.
the other things. We look to see if there's ice, if there's evidence that there was water
That
there
is
once upon
quite
a
true.
time. Yeah.
So, my friend, so I'm describing to you a substance that is probably the most valuable substance, at least traded in the world, but still it behaves like a fugitive.
And because it behaves like a fugitive, until we understand that we have to, I don't know if it's to control that resource, we will continue to undervalue it. Is that what it is? I read in your book where you spoke about water speaks to power, and that voice becomes very clear when water becomes scarce. You said when middle class folks who are used to opening their tap and getting water suddenly open their tap and nothing comes out, then they understand the language of water,
We have a
and
problem.
you have a problem. And
We have a
when
problem.
political unrest starts because folks are thirsty and
Yeah.
dying and cannot grow their crops, so they're hungry for
Yeah.
lack of water, we hear the power of water. Allan, right now it's time to take a quick break. I am so fascinated by this conversation because it goes in a different direction from how we normally hear people speak about water. And that so fits into the mold of what I like to say that this week in interview is that we take contemporary and important topics and present it to our audience in a way that they haven't thought about it before. And I think we've already achieved that. Folks, I hope you agree with me that this is a very exciting conversation. And stay with us for a quick break. Let's get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back to continue our conversation with Dr. Allan Williams.
Presented by Presented by.
People say I've got a great smile. Well, I have to say, this is all thanks to the professional team at Beacon Dental Group right here in Dorchester, Massachusetts. I've got world-class dental care. Beacon Dental Group has expert and caring staff dedicated to providing the most advanced and satisfactory treatment in all aspects of oral health. Their services are designed to meet your needs and give you a perfect smile, too. General checkups, cosmetic surgery, Gemini laser service, and advanced procedures, all in a state-of-the-art facility. Call or visit Beacon Dental Group today, 1026 Blue Hill Avenue, Dorchester, Massachusetts, or call 617-282-2146 for a smile that lights the world.
If you live in Canada, the US, and the UK and are looking for Dominica products including cocoa sticks, bay rum, coffee, soaps, crafts, and other popular Dominica items, then look no further. You can now shop on BuyDominicaOnline.com, a secure, easy-to-navigate website selling a wide variety of Dominica-made and Dominica-inspired products. When you shop on BuyDominicaOnline.com, you are helping to grow Dominica's economy. Go to BuyDominicaOnline.com and enjoy home away from home.
Looking to promote your business, engage current customers, and reach new people? Well, look no further. From the basic presentation to a fully fledged advertisement, use your video ads to attract customers. At Man's Audiovisual Productions, we do just that. We produce videos for business and event promotions, product demo videos, animated explainer videos, fundraiser ads, and much, much more. Engage your clients and sell online. We customize the video to match your brand design. Guaranteed to play flawless on all devices, including smart TVs. Contact us at telephone number 203-690-4342 or 767-245-6238. Visit our website, mansaudiovisual.com. or email us at derekvideo@gmail.com.
As I was saying, this is Kurt Diamond. I just want to let you know on March 25th, I will be on Dissect. So tune in 7 p.m. I'll be on scene. Hopefully. Yes.
All right, welcome back, listeners. Thanks for staying with us through the break. Thank you to our sponsors. Only thing I would say is that I get a lot of compliments on the flyers that we send out. I want to let you know that those flyers are designed by Man's Audiovisual. They do the graphic works for TDN and for This Week in Interviews. So check them out. They do from flyers to full-blown production. They can show up at your event with professional cameras and professional cameramen and all the equipment, broadcast live, but they can also record and give you something for your memory bank and for posterity. So check them out, Man's Audiovisual, and of course, I always encourage you to buy Dominica online, get your goodies. If you have gifts that you have to give out for Easter, for birthdays, for anniversary, support buydominicaonline.com and get your goodies from there. All right, and Dissect, look like they have an exciting guest tonight on Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join them. But tonight we're talking water, and we're talking water with Dr. Allan Williams. He is an economist specialized in natural resources, land and water. And tonight we're commemorating, or we're observing, United Nations observance of March 22nd as World Water Day. And Dr. Williams is bringing his perspective from all his experience. You can tell that he has his hands elbow deep into that topic because he presents it in a way that I haven't let anybody present it like that. Where he breaks it down, not to make it simplistic, but to where it is we can relate. We can relate, and so far, I think we're getting an education on that. So, Alan, you talk about the value of water. We talk about the availability of water and sometimes the lack thereof. And you talk about what we should be looking at is not that, well, rain falls and the water disappears, but is when the rain falls, what can we do to make sure that we can capture that water and make it available? We know we live in the Caribbean. For most of the audience are Dominicans. However, not everybody is Dominican. So a lot of people in the Caribbean know what scarcity of water is, or what it is to be judicious in our use of water. Do we have a freshwater crisis in the Caribbean, or if you bring it more local in the Eastern Caribbean, do we have a crisis of freshwater? I know there was an election in Antigua recently, and you spoke about the political impact, and we know that the government seemed to have won by 3 votes. Literally by 3 votes or 7 votes or something like that, because they have a 1-seat majority, and one of the seats that they won it by 7 votes. And we know water was front and center. The availability of water was front and center in that election campaign. So let's talk about the water availability of fresh water in the Eastern Caribbean. What is, from your experience or from you looking around, what's your take on that?
Well, okay, the situation in the Eastern Caribbean, okay. I will say, of course, that in the Eastern Caribbean, we are in a situation of crisis. But that will be putting it mildly. And I say that because we are in a situation of foundation crisis. And what do I mean by that? I mean that not only do we not recognize the true nature of the crisis we have in the Caribbean, but we are not even sure of how to think about it. And I'm gonna explore this a little bit with you quickly. Okay. Now let me tell you what the crisis is. First of all, as you remember, I said water acts like a fugitive. So if I say fugitive to you, the first thing that should come to your mind is that it's always on the run. That's what fugitive does. Okay. So if that is water, how can you then describe your problem with it in terms of stock issues like scarcity, shortage, low rainfall, drought? These are stock issues. This thing is always running. You have to describe it in terms of a flow. So that when I describe the water crisis, it is simply this. It happens, or it's happening, because the rate at which we are using the available water exceeds the rate at which it's being replenished. So it's moving out from our use faster than we get in to fill it back in. That's the flow concept there, okay? We call that a water deficit. So you would see now, if you look at the map, like this map here of the Caribbean, what this map was done in 2015 when I was doing this type of stuff. What this map is saying to me, that in Antigua, there is a water deficit of 60.8 million gallons per month. Okay. And then if you go up to Anguilla, you get a water deficit of 15.2 million gallons per month. Okay. Now, it is very interesting that I'm showing you this map. And then there's a guy in Antigua in 2016, a commentator writing in their most prestigious newspaper called the Antiguan Observer. And this is what he says. This is what he said. The issue of a water shortage, notice his language, in Antigua and Barbuda is a matter that appears to have no clear solution. No, I'll get to that one. Let me just stick to the map for a minute. Yeah. It appears to have no clear solution. Now, the analysis that I used to show you the Antiguan water deficit is the same analysis that when you come down to Dominica, it shows you a water surplus of 180 million gallons per month. And this is not hearsay. The U.S. Army had done a study of three drainage systems in Dominica, and when they did that, they measured that those drainage systems, and these were those in the Layo River, the Roseau River, and the Melville River. They were depositing into the ocean 257 million gallons per day. And Dominica was using, at that time, 10 million gallons per day. So now it's about 15 to 20 million gallons a day. So if you have a situation in which this island has this renegade of water running at a rate of 250 something million into the sea, that's fresh water, and they're only taking their little teacup and taking out 20 million, that is a water surplus. So now you tell me, why would a guy look at the map if he's seeing the same reality I'm seeing and say that the matter appears to have no clear solution? My heavens, Anthony, New York City gets its water from the Catskill Mountains, that is 201 miles away. Antigua is 191 miles away from all of that surplus that runs into the sea in Dominica. And you're telling me that there's no clear solution? Well, I really don't quite understand what reality he is in, what planet. But that is what predominates in terms of the analysis and in terms of the programs and the projects to deal with the crisis of water deficits in the Caribbean.
So Allan, there's a question that I want to talk about in that regard. We talk about sovereignty, where Dominica is a sovereign country, and the water within the boundaries of that sovereign belongs, quote unquote, belongs to Dominica. If we were to expand that globally, then it means that some of the areas where that there's a water deficit, as you put it, are dependent or on those where they have a water surplus. Bring it back to the Caribbean, where we seem to be able to cooperate on a common currency, and we have the Caribbean common market and all of that. In terms of water governance, should the resources such as water be viewed as a regional resource rather than an insular island by island resource? Would that be part of the solution?
Well, in a sense, it will, but it will take us quite a little, how should I say, a little maneuvering of our past mental history with respect to water to be able to get countries to arrive at that. You know, the one good thing about the Caribbean, was that when the Caribbean islands became independent, we already had a West Indian cricket team. So I doubt whether if we didn't, that we had become independent, we would have been able to put together that collection of a West Indian cricket team, which of course you see did very much. Okay. But the basic thing about what you're just saying is this. It is that if you do go towards the situation of saying, let us start to look at the water resources in the region and see whether we can make a more equitable distribution. Because it's not a matter of sovereignty, Dominica is just taking 20 million out of 257 million. My heavens, if I send 60 million somewhere else, how much is Dominica missing? So that's not the issue at all. The issue comes in terms of what is the alternative that these other countries, this is Antigua and these, have decided to do instead of sharing our resource. And most of them have decided to go in terms of desalination. They've sought to think that, okay, we will control it because we will have our own desalination plants. And so we will, and of course, it looks attractive because they look around us, and what's the most abundant thing there is the sea. So why not we start drinking from the sea? If we can just get a desalination plant, bring it in, and we'll drink it from the sea. Okay. So once that gets into the thinking that desalination is the mode of operation, then it becomes quite difficult for us to overcome that. Okay. And one of the things we have to overcome is really to be seen in terms of where it is that these concepts of desalination against water imports, let's say, from Dominica, where did these things arrive? And we do have, interestingly, this is not speculation or conspiracy theory, we have not only 35 years of experience in desalination in Antigua, but we do have reports, a disaster page report that was done on the one time that Antigua ever imported water from Dominica. And that was in 1984. Okay. And you can see it in that is called a disaster case report.
Mm-hmm.
And in that report, Antigua, here it is. Antigua, if you look at it carefully, you see the number of people affected by this drought was 75,000 in 1984. The population of Antigua in 1984 was probably 60,000. So that even counting the visitors. Okay?
The visitors, right?
And then yes, and then interesting, my friend, they decided to set up a task force because this island was gonna thirst to death. And they had these recommendations. And if you look at the recommendations there, expanding the available surface, increasing conservation, developing stuff. Look at the last one. It's actually said, I didn't put this in. It says, barging water as a last resort. That is the mental situation that was set up. But the interesting thing about it is after they play around for a few months, they realized that last resort was really the first resort because people are going to die.
Because it is the only viable option, really.
Only viable resort. So that's why I quoted the Caribbean News brief on July 16, 1984, which said, water-rich Dominica has agreed to sell its water-poor neighbors, Antigua, 2 million gallons of water every day at a cost of $3 per 1,000 gallons. Okay, so that was the first and only time that there was ever the consciousness that we need to be dealing with water as a shared resource. Remember, it's a shared resource, not one of ownership by anyone. But here's the quick thing I want to just mention before we get too far into this. And that is that by time 1987, 3 years afterwards, Antigua had then decided to build its first desalination plant. Built in 1987. Okay.
87. Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, was to solve what I call the water deficit, what they call the water shortages, etc. Anthony, in 2016, this is 1987. That's almost 20 years after that. Antigua had gone through 6 building 6 desalination plants. And
6.
6 desalination plants. And still, they had not been able to solve the water. And my map of water deficit and water surplus situation continues to sit there staring everybody in the eye. Matter of fact, I'll just tell you, in the budget speech of 2016, the Prime Minister acknowledged how serious the water situation was. That's in 2016. He's not in 1984. By saying, further, I'm quoting, further, we increased the water supply by 50% to 6 million gallons. At that time, we were obtaining the maximum delivery of desalinated water from all available resources. But we were aware that it still falls short of a
Short.
national
Wow.
demand of $8 million. Well, again, you see, he still doesn't understand he's dealing with a fugitive subject. He still he still thinks he's dealing with stocks. He still does stock. He think water comes and when it falls, it builds castle in the sand. No, it does not. It runs off right
It runs
away,
away.
and
There's
it
actually
doesn't
something
leave.
called running water. Yeah.
That's right. It doesn't. It doesn't. It leaves nothing to be desired. Anyway, this one maybe talk
So
of the what.
yeah, so certainly. I mean, I'm going to crave your indulgence, Alan, if you have the time to stay on, because it's almost 9 o'clock. Stay on for an additional 30 minutes so that we can really, because this conversation is important. Um, like you said, 200 million gallons full into the sea, and you only mentioned 3 major river basins. Dominica has more. Because I'm from Castle Bruce, and we have quite a few major rivers in Castle Bruce that is not included in when you cook Roseau, Layu, and which one is it, Melvin Hall, I think.
Yes.
There are
Yes.
others. There are others. But
Yes.
so if they measure 200 million in those 3, I mean, you could easily triple that as to the amount of available fresh water that's just flowing into the ocean. But desalination, as you said, tried. I have built desalination plants in the US. I have worked with engineers who operate the desalination plants in Antigua and in Anguilla. They work for General Electric, and General Electric runs the plants. And we know that it's expensive to produce. It's expensive to maintain. You may be flowing water out, but you're flowing money into those desalination plants quicker than you're flowing money out. So as it's proven, desalination does not seem to be a viable option. It's a bandage, it's a stopgap, it's a limping along and hoping that, I don't know, something will happen that will increase the water availability. We can continue to talk about the resource of fresh water, and to stay a little bit more on how we can shift our mindset to look at the water that's available, say, in Dominica, as belonging to the OECS. And the benefit that Dominica will get from that is that it's situated in Dominica, so they get to sell it and realize some economic value from it. I mean, is there really a case that water on a very viable scale can be imported or exported from Dominica to the neighbors? Because we haven't spoken about the challenges of shipping and storage when it gets to the destination and all of that. And we also mentioned that water can be very political. When you take those challenges or those hurdles into account, is it really viable? And if it is, why is it that Dominica has not been able to bail that cat, so to speak?
Well, let me start with the second one. First of all, yes, it is viable. It's viable because of the alternative, which is desalination. which is not only extremely expensive. You just talked about the extremely expensiveness of desalination, but you have to understand the basic logic of desalination plants is not to solve the problem of a water deficit. As a matter of fact, when we get a desalination plant, it comes in there with a guaranteed price, not a guaranteed supply. The government guarantees it that it will buy all the water that it produces at this price. So they got a price that's good for them. But here's the problem in that. Okay, the problem is that in a very perverse way, the desalination plant itself should see a future that is the same or looks very good if water deficits continue. Because if the water deficit starts to be addressed, okay, then the government now has so much desalination capacity it doesn't need to buy anymore. And remember, the desalination plant only gets paid what it supplies. So if it's asked to cut back on its supply, then it's not running too much of a profit. Okay? So it has a built-in thing. I'm afraid it isn't worried because it knows that this stuff that's going on here will not be able to solve that problem. But let me just quickly do two things, if you don't mind. One is the question you say, well, why Dominica's not being able to sell its water? Well, that's because these other folks haven't gotten to the mentality where they understand the significance and the benefits of buying it. I went to over 15 different financial institutions throughout the world trying to finance water from Dominica to the rest of the Caribbean. And the first question that always comes to me from people is, say, well, if this is obvious, why are these people in St. Kitts and Nevis and all these places not buying water? And I said, well, simple, because they have no capacity to receive it. If you give me the money and I get 2 barges of 1.2 million gallons of water, and I drive over into Antigua and says, okay, I brought some water for you. The question is, where are you going to put it? They have no tanks on the wharf. This is storage tanks to empty it in. And this is a commodity that doesn't stand still, it runs. So I can't just sit it and put it on the wharf and say, well, you guys, you can pick it up when you're ready. Okay. Now, you ask me, well, why is it that they don't have in their whole portfolio to deal with water a capacity to import? And that comes back to the water management system. Now, we had to deal with this. Okay. And what you're seeing here is two things. I'll go through it very quickly. What exists in the islands, it's called water demand management. And to them, actually, let's say in Antigua, they'll say we have 3 supplies: surf water, surface flows, groundwater, and desalinated. And to them, again, that is the total that they have. And their big job, the guy who's the manager, his big job, he thinks, is to distribute this among the different competing demands. Okay, so that's called water demand management. Never mind the fact, by the way, that if he has, like in Antigua, where there is 83% of the water that is produced by desalination under a fixed agreement, then the management has the big task is just to buy and sell. Because all the water that the desal produce, they have to buy it, okay, regardless. Now, water portfolio management that we try to put to them is to say, again, that no, you have a wider range. If you look into countries, like there are about 36 countries in the world who import import fresh water to the extent of more than 50% of their water supply comes from outside their political boundaries. So if you do that, what you have to be dealing with now is what is called water portfolio management. It's like these five that I have here are really assets in the portfolio. And you sort of juggle them in such a way that you continue to increase the flow that goes in to match the flow that's coming out. I remember
Right.
that's what I said is the fundamental problem. It's a flow problem. The flow that's going in is not enough for the flow that's coming out. If you start to match the flow that's going in to the match that's coming out, you are decreasing the water deficit. So water portfolio management becomes the essence of management in a way that can bring about a solution to the problem. Okay. Now, just quickly, let me just do two things, Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned about the feasibility, etc. Now, I can put up there a um, a a chart about Dominica's water surplus, the water surplus island. Look at this chart, Auntie. What we are seeing here is that the UN, and not UN, FAO, I think, has measured the per capita water availability in the Caribbean. You see Dominica. The next island in the Caribbean that has enough water in there, or has water to the extent that Dominica has per each individual, is Grenada. And in that one, that is 33% lower than what Dominica has. And then when you come to Antigua and Barbuda, the per capita water availability in Antigua, as in Dominica, as is shown by this, is more than twice the per capita availability in Antigua and St.
Antigua.
Lucia. It is more
Mm-hmm.
than twice. Okay. So you cannot tell me, okay, well, actually, you cannot. That's one reason why you cannot tell me that there isn't enough grounds for us to be able to share this type of water. Okay, but there's one thing that you touched upon quickly, and you talked about water governance, and allow me to just jump on that very
Yes,
quickly.
certainly, certainly. We have until at least until 9:30, Alan, if you have the
Oh,
time.
okay,
So go
okay,
ahead.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
I was just
No,
trying to
no,
get
no.
to this water governance situation.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened here when we were going through our things with respect to trying to get the management of water authorities in the rest of the Caribbean to start the switch from water demand management to water portfolio management, we were running into some stiff competition or some stiff resistance, and we couldn't figure out why. We done all the logic, we have explained it. We've given comparison. We showed you Singapore, which is the same size as Antigua, okay, but is doing tremendously better. It has a bigger population, of course, but one reason is that Singapore, over 60% of its water is imported.
It's important. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and only 10% is being provided by desalination. So we've done that. We've done other things to show you that the pattern of desalinated water in like in Antigua and in Anguilla more mimics the pattern in places like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and these Middle Eastern countries. And what's the difference between that? You cannot pretend or behave with respect to water as if you are a Middle Eastern country. They have oil. And fuel is about 60% of the whole desalination process. Cost is fuel.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so they can afford it. Okay. You can't. And as I said, you in Dominica, when you look into Dominica and you see a surplus there, it is not a surplus that's being generated by any machinery. It's a surplus that has the same type of characteristics that you were enamored by looking at the sea and thought you would drink from the sea. And that is, it looks inexhaustible because it's a renewable surplus. Dominica's rainfall continues to produce this every year. It is just that rain does its fugitive tricks in Dominica in a bigger way than it does it in Antigua. Okay, but
Let's run off another. But
yes,
Alan, to add to what you're saying, right? The islands are worried about depending on importation of water because who depends on water to come by boat. But very few of the islands have oil. So the equivalent thing is to say that you have to build an oil refinery in every island because they use gas in their cars. Where in
yes,
Dominica they have tanks. They receive petrol, it goes into the tanks, and then they distribute it into the population.
that's
It's
right.
exactly the same scenario. You build tanks, you get water, and then you distribute it into your population. Antigua, it doesn't mean that you have to build a refinery because you use kerosene in your planes and you use gas in your car and diesel in your truck. So therefore, you want to have your own refinery or whatever it is, or because you don't have oil, then you up a creek. Um, what you're saying is so obvious that what is required is to work out a mechanism whereby, and it's not that difficult. We get oil all the way from the Middle East coming into the Caribbean. We get oil from Venezuela up the chain, from Trinidad going up the islands.
Well,
We just don't think of water in that same perspective.
yes. Well, Anthony, what you're saying is true. Okay, excepting that things are happening. We are growing. We are observing. Okay, and when we observe, we start to wonder whether it has anything to do with whether the proposals we're making is simple or complex, or there is another factor that's involved in it. Why is it that we have a conceptual framework with respect to, I'm looking at the other countries, with respect to water, okay, that keeps them thinking that their solution is in technology and desalination and not simply an agreement to have part of it coming from the surplus island that's in the midst. Okay, and that one I want to just make a quick mention here. I think that is coming because the thinking behind this has three assumptions, and these three assumptions, if you get them wrong, you're likely to be in serious problems. The first assumption is the order in the natural world. Okay, we think there's order in the natural world. Okay, and there's the assumption that we understand the natural world order so well that we can use it to a beneficial way in human interaction. This implies that the causal links in the past, which is droughts leading to our scarcity and to our seriousness, we now look and see if we cannot get around it, get around the natural order. And the thing was that desalination was supposed to be able to get around the natural order because there's always water in the sea. You do that. That is the first assumption that has a serious problem. The second one is the assumption of what's called rational choice. Okay, and the assumption is that the ultimate choice is being made on a personal level. We usually make the ultimate choice between minimizing pain and maximizing pleasure. Pleasure. Okay. But now we are thinking that we can make this on a national level, and that is to be able to minimize pain and maximize profits and get ourselves out of the problem. But the only problem we have with that is that you're talking about water. And when you talk about water and rational choice at a national level, you'd have to deal with something that's called sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. I won't get to that. But the biggest one, though, that is called, I call it intentional capacity building. And I know it sounds like I'm throwing about words for you, but let me tell you something quickly, Anthony. When I was in school, okay, we used to say that if you wanted to get into business, I mean, to really make money, join the military industrial complex. Because when you join them, what you can do is that you can sell to the government military hardware, and you can now claim that this hardware is a credible deterrent. Because everybody in those days when I was in school, there was the Vietnam War, everybody was for peace. Nobody was for war. So you can't go around selling hardware and says this will lick up these people. The concept behind the credible deterrent was that if it is credible, it will deter. So what is coming will not come. So there won't be any war. But then when war comes and you have to fight it out, you lose some of the equipment, you know what, they come back and they say, well, you have to buy more of the credible deterrent.
Yeah, otherwise you'll be vulnerable.
Was not big enough. This is what is happening now with what I call intentional capacity building. If I am an investor and I want to sell these guys something, okay, what I have to do is to get it to be captured in their mind as an intentional capacity that they must have. So what happens? The Prime Minister builds his first, or the government builds his first desalination thing in 1987. And by 2016, they have built 6 of them, and they still have not gotten rid of this water deficit. So
Right.
what's going on here? I call that they're caught into the thinking of intentional capacity building. They're just building something because it's on the intention. So they bring large equipment, they bring in large equipment, huge plants, long runaways, all that type of stuff. Doesn't really come in to solve the problem anymore. It just comes in to build the continue building capacity because they're caught in it. And I'm just going to tell you that this is not, my friend, this is not at all conspiracy theory. Because just last month, I got a message that came to me from the government the government information services in Antigua. And what it said was this. It said that how they had decided that these desalination plants, which they thought was weatherproof, were not. Because in the dry season, which is winter in the US, you get cold fronts that come down. And when the cold front turns up the water and makes the turbidity in the water even increase, they have to shut down the plants. Because if they don't, they will damage the membranes that do the desalination. Now, just bear with me. So what happens there is that they have to shut down all of them, all 83%, because not like if one part of the sea is good and the other part is not. It's the whole Antigua. Okay. So what came up last month? You know what they decided to do as a solution? They're looking at it. They decide, Lord help us. They decided that maybe it's possible for them to dig deep trenches on the coast and fill it in with seawater so that when that occurs, the desalination plants can just take it from the deep trenches, which will be calmer, rather than going out and taking it from the sea.
Prevent the water from running away.
but so now we are at the point of trying to solve not the water deficit, but the solution we're trying to solve now. The solution, which is desalination, is giving us a problem. So now we're trying to solve the solution's problem in itself. This is like,
As like the medical industry, take this pill for a headache, and by the way, it's going to cost you. It's going to cause you to get a stroke. So take this one to prevent the stroke, and then take
That
this one
is
because it affect your heart.
that
That kind
that
of
is
that kind
that,
of a thinking.
that is
But
that is
so
that's
so
exactly
so
okay.
Alan, the danger though that we face, actively face, is that while these islands are taking their time to come to the understanding that the solution lies in making themselves able to get water from Dominica. Dominica is left at its own devices with very weak laws about preservation of that water resource. And so we have seen a lot of recent capital projects where right now there is an international airport that says that's going to affect 6 rivers coming from Montreal. And they have to divert those waters and all of those things. So while these islands are thirsty and messing around for 20 years with ineffective solutions, the island with the surplus, because they're not realizing an economic benefit from having that surplus, is undervaluing that surplus, and therefore not, like, when they cost a project, what a project is really going to cost, they're not really taking into account the impact that it's having on the water availability in Dominica. And so, how do the Eastern Caribbean look at that and see that that is a looming crisis, and try to work out their way out of that? You understand what I mean? What can we
Yeah, yeah,
do about
I
preserving
understand what you mean.
and protecting the water resource?
Well, that's one half of it. I saw a couple of weeks ago or last week. Afi Mate had a program with, he got some technical people, and they're talking like about the cost or the thing of violating planning laws and this type of stuff. That's one set. But from water, we've learned something else. Like, for instance, we've learned from looking at how investors look at us. And I want to look at this. I had a site called the Deloitte and Touche. Here's this review, Anthony. This is the investors' perspective, okay? How are investors advised to view water-stressed countries? This was in 2014 when we were doing our stuff, trying to sell water. And this is the major financial people writing to investors throughout the world. And they were telling them, you got to be careful when you invest in water-stressed countries, because you can't always buy what you need. Okay? Well, wait a second now, Anthony. What do you mean by you can't buy what you need? You mean a big corporation ain't going to have enough money to buy the water that it needs? That can't be true. They're coming in with the big water. When we started to dig into that, what we realized was happening was that these investors understood that the decisions, like especially with respect to water, and also with respect to other things, land also, by the way, is one in which there is a trade-off between individual or social interests and the private enterprise interests. And so when you try to overcome that, especially with water, what you have to do is to look at the decision-making process within government. That's called the governance system. And I'll quickly say what you will find is that there are two types of individuals running there. One is what we call the veto players. Okay. And these are general persons who have gotten themselves into the administrative structure, that they have become empowered, either formally or informally, to promote or to block policy and even block management decisions. And then the next set is what I call the gatekeepers. And these are also people who are able to channel to the selective winners from among multiple options. So that our problem in trying to get the people in the Caribbean to buy water from Dominica is that we really weren't getting to either gatekeepers nor veto players. We are going to the director of water and these are the type of guys up there, maybe even to the minister, the permanent secretary. And the point is that in certain natural resources, there are people who in the administration play this role. And so when Deloitte and Touche tells you, you got to be careful. You can't always buy what you need. There's literally say you can't always just go to the people who you have to pay write the check to buy it. You may need to go around to somebody else because there could be a governance decision that will say, because if you go to the guy, the director of what, he said, well, listen, I love to sell to you, but I don't have any. And
Right.
then our directors will say, well, just, you know, we do 3 days a week water, send it to them to 2 days a week. And we'll find enough to sell these boys. That's what is happening also. You have this is what's called the governance structure. So that's basically it.
So Alan, we have to start winding up a bit.
Yes.
We focused a lot on the Eastern Caribbean. We focused on Dominica having a surplus right next to islands that are very dry and have that deficit. But that can expand, that situation can expand globally as well, right? How can we address the demand for fresh water on a global level?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna just jump here for 2 minutes. First of all, interesting, in the book that you wrote, you will see that we actually had proposed a system for us to be able, for the world to be able to deal with this global water problem. It was based on 2 bases, Anthony. When you have to deal with a global problem, you have to ensure 2 things. One is that your solution matches the problem in scope and in scale. Okay, we were sure about the scope because that same incidence where you saw we found this surplus water in Dominica and everybody around it, we had incidences where you had the same idea or the same situation in Africa. We had the same situation with Turkey in Asia, and we had the same situation, the same situation in Indonesia, where you had a big surplus and oil right around them. Yeah, that map, if you look at this, right around them is the same situation we've seen in the Caribbean. Okay, so there are 2 things I wanted to quickly say to sort of conclude this. One is that, and we having a UN, this is not today, there's a big UN conference to deal with global water issue. We had proposed also a system to deal with global water issue. But the first thing that we had proposed was that the UN should itself declare water, fresh water, as not an essential resource, okay, but rather an existential resource. And once you declare water as an existential resource, then that says a lot of things. That tells us that nobody can sort of take any bit of water and sequester it in any way so that it can not be available to other people. And that's a big power play. You can imagine what can happen once you make that decision, make it a law, that water is an existential resource, is necessary for our existence, and so you can't play with that. But coming back to your system, what can we do? And I will just say, in terms of us, and in terms of water day, there are just two things that I wanted to suggest.
Mm-hmm.
One is that we ourselves um, we enlarge our understanding of water wisdom. Okay, and we intensify our advocacy through something I call landscape literacy. Okay. The interesting thing you said, well, in Dominica, we have so much water, we don't care about it, etc. By the way, if Dominica is to be recolonized, okay, it can only happen if it loses control of its water exports. If somebody is taking that water and selling it to the Middle East, and of course we ourselves are enjoying a lot of foreign exchange from that, then we start to lose control. But so the other part of it, though, is if we don't get conscious of the part that our rivers, our mountains, and these things play in making sure that we have enough water. Okay. And I'm just wanted to, I wanted to leave you this one story, my friend,
Mm-hmm.
and that is a quick one. You know, in 1532, the Spanish explorers encountered the Incas, and they entered Cusco. And when they entered Cusco, there were a lot of children. The adults weren't there to look at them. It was only the children were about. And the children were singing to themselves a sort of song. And let me see if I gotta make sure if I can mimic it. It went something like this: Inca, Roca, Manco, Capac, Villa, Choca, Pachacuti, Topa, Inca, Atahualpa. And the Spanish people said, wait a minute. They asked the interpreters, what are they saying? And they said, well, these folks are just singing the names of the Inca emperors of old. Okay. Now you just take yourself to, let's say, the Vacas on the afternoon, school just finished, and you're driving through with your American friend, and there are all these children on the road, and the children are shouting and making a lot of noise. And just imagine if you hear them singing something like, Mon anglais, toi piton, diablotin, plat pai, watten waven souffre. And then your visitor says, what are they singing? And you say, well, ask them. And you ask them, and they say, we are singing the names of the mountain peaks that allow us so much abundant fresh water in Dominica.
Mm-hmm.
That is, you have to say, blessed are the children, because they understand landscape literacy, and they're going to build a future for them, a better future for them in Dominica.
That is such a beautiful place to live, Allan. My friend, I thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. You brought so much information. You brought so much information to us tonight, and it's a different conversation than what we have about water normally. Normally, we just talk about the amount of water that we have and how we need to preserve our rivers and whatever, whatever. But I think you bring it to a point where we say, Dominica, what I'm taking away from it is that Dominica and Dominicans have a responsibility to preserve that resource, because it doesn't just belong to the boundaries of that 300 square mile island. It can be shared with our neighbors in Antigua and Anguilla and St. Lucia and St. Martin and Barbados and St. Croix and all of those places that have water deficits. And so we owe that responsibility to our fellow Caribbean people. And in that process of feeling that need, we will generate enough economic income to sustain the rest of life in Dominica, so that we have a valuable and a high quality of life. They import water into Dominica.
Bottled water.
Bottled water. Yeah,
Okay,
I
yeah.
know it's bottled water, but I'm still saying that the bottle, it's not even like when we had colonial times where we would export the fruits and then buy it back as juice. It's not even that. We're not even exporting the water that's being bottled and then sold back to us. It's not even that. And so, as you said, and I will end it, I will steal from you and end it that way. That if we can get our children to be singing about the landscape and the rivers that allow us to have all that fresh water, I can guarantee you Dominica would not be importing one drop of fresh water. We would be serving our neighbors to our greatest extent. And so my friend, I this is where we end. I don't know if there's anything that you really wanted to say that we didn't get a chance to talk about, because I know you make good notes. Um, so before I let you do that, though, I want to remind listeners that if you liked tonight's conversation, and the book is even more, it's not a hard read. It's a fascinating read, because Alan is a very good storyteller, and he brings, you can see that he thinks about it properly and puts it in a frame where we understand. I encourage you to get the copy of his book, Deluge. Um, I have it. I have a copy right here. So um, it's called. I have my copy right here. It's called Deluge: The Caribbean Water Crisis and the Global Water Challenge. Dominica's water surplus. And when you think of deluge, you think of an abundance. You go out, you go into dinner. You're coming from dinner. You go into somewhere nice, and if you're in Dominica, that big guanlapli, that shower just drenched is you. And if you've been to Dominica, you can relate. And so, Alan, I'm going to give you a chance to just say some closing remarks before we bring the show to an end.
Well, the only close remark I have is Mon anglais, toi piton, Diablo tin, plateray, Watton Raven Suffrey. God bless them all.
Castlebrooks River, Lyre River,
God bless them all.
Crayfish River, yeah, and may it remain abundantly so. Even though
Thank
we've
you.
seen evidence of the reduced volume, it can be recaptured. And so, Alan, I thank you, and even for being my guest tonight. But I also thank you as a Dominican who came to Dominica with fresh eyes and was able to see that resource and write about it, so to help us to identify that resource, that valuable resource that we have, and to let us to think about it, that it's not just a Dominican thing, it's a Caribbean thing, it's an OECS thing, it's a global thing. To have such, and you said it, one of the things that stuck with me, what you said, is that most people look at the ocean and wish they could drink from the ocean because it's just so abundant. In Dominica, we have that same experience, except that it's fresh water and we can actually drink it. You know,
True,
I
true
want I
experience.
want the listeners to
Thank you.
really think on that and let that sink in, and to really appreciate it. And let's have some fresh conversation around fresh water. My friend,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much,
Thank
and
you.
I really appreciate. And the conversation it lived up to everything I expected. I will certainly invite you back, because we need your perspective and your experience all the way, to to help us to think about what makes a man is that he can think. And so your thoughts help us to think about it in that way. Tomorrow is meteorology day, World Meteorology Day. My friend Nach reminded me of that. So all the meteorologists, I want to say happy day to you tomorrow. And those of us who benefit from the work that they do, because they can help predict hurricanes. They save lives because they can help tell us what the temperature is going to be. They save us from sweating too much or being too cold. And so they're a valuable part of our society. So we're going to say happy day to them tomorrow. Folks, on Friday from 7 to 9 p.m., we are doing a poetry, what we call a poetry slam, but I think we have about 12 or 13 poets who are going to come on this medium, on TDN radio, TDN TV, Same medium where you get in the program right now from 7 p.m. on Friday. They're going to be sharing their poems with us. We're going to have fun because yesterday was World Poetry Day. And so we decided to do a poetry slam. It's not a competition, it'll just be fun. Folks presenting their works. And you don't want to miss that. So that's on Friday. That's this Friday, 7 p.m. Make sure you check it out. All right. So, folks, there you have it. Another really exciting episode of This Week in Interview. If you didn't see the bottom of my shirt, it says honor nature. Right? It says honor nature. Water is life, honor nature. So happy World Waters Day to everybody. I want to say thank you to my folks in the background, my producers who make this show possible, our sponsors, and of course my guest, Dr. Allan N. Williams, author of Deluge. I want you to get his book, Deluge. I have another one of his books right here. It's called In Ordinary Times. It's right here. It's by it talks about all the work that he's